I'm delighted to introduce our two speakers. Dominique Bouchard is Head of Learning and Interpretation at English Heritage, where she leads interpretation, contemporary art, learning, digital publishing, and the award-winning Shout Out Loud National Youth Engagement Project across more than 420 historic buildings, monuments, and sites, from Stonehenge to Hadrian's Wall. She's an academic, curator, and educator with particular expertise in contested histories and divided societies, including Northern Ireland and Hong Kong. Dominique is a trustee of the William Morris Society and former director of the Outburst Queer Arts Festival. And she's joined by Anna Niland, who is the associate director of the National Youth Theatre and oversees their talent development programs, which include courses, the NYT Rep Company, and flagship social inclusion courses, Playing Up and Stepping Up. She trained with the National Youth Theatre and at Rose Bruford College and worked extensively as an actor on stage, screen, and radio. She was creative director on Shout Out Loud, an award-nominated LGBTQ+ themed site-specific show, Eltham Palace, which was in partnership with English Heritage. And we're going to be hearing about their work just now called Our House. And we're going to watch a video and then there'll be a live Q&A. Dominique, whom we welcome most warmly to this Out in the Past festival for the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. Joy.
I'm really happy to be here and excited to be able to share our work. We'll kick right off with, I guess, sharing our screen with our little presentation. We're here today. Anna and I are here to talk to you about co-curating with queer communities, and specifically talking about the Our House project, which was part of Shout Out Loud. So to give you a bit of context, Shout Out Loud is a consortium project about youth voice. It's led by English Heritage, but with our partners PhotoWorks, the National Youth Theatre, Sound Connections, and the Council for British Archaeology's Young Archaeologists Club. And the idea is for, to create platforms and empower young people to tell stories and explore history and heritage in ways that are relevant to them, but also helping us as a sector understand how we can do a better job of engaging and involving young people. So as part of the Shout Out Loud program, we did a project called Our House, or I should say the young people did a project called Our House, which was a kind of, again, another partnership project working with Metro Charity, which is a London and Southeast based LGBTQ+ youth charity, the National Youth Theatre, and English Heritage. And this was about working with young people to explore the LGBT Eltham Palace, which is, I'll give you a little bit of an overview of in a second. And the participants in the program and all Shout Out Loud programs are between the ages of 11 and 25. And for the Our House program, we actually work with quite a broad range of ages and young people. I don't know, Anna, if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, so thank you, Dominique, and it's lovely to be here for a start. So we then met with Dominique and sort of talked about the idea of Eltham Palace and the queer history, and how NYT, the National Youth Theatre, could engage its membership within this project. Weirdly and very wonderfully, I just moved into a house opposite Eltham Palace. So it was really local and knew the history and was really quite excited by this opportunity. So as a queer woman myself, I sort of jumped straight in and also worked with the membership to find and identify 20 young people who identified as LGBTQ+ members and who would be interested in animating and being a part of this project, not only to perform but also to work alongside eight young people from Metro who they would buddy, as for some of them it was the first time that they would have been on stage or done any kind of performance. So it was a really unique opportunity for our members, so a really fantastic one.
Thank you. So why Eltham Palace? Not just because Anna lived nearby, it was a very happy coincidence. We have some known queer connections for Eltham, both in the Middle Ages and in the 20th century. There was a substantial amount of existing historical research, so we had a lot of information and knew quite a bit about the history of Eltham and it's kind of the people who lived there. And of course, it's this really iconic site, but there's a chasm between the local community and Eltham Palace, where, you know, when you speak to a lot of people in the local area aren't really familiar or aware that Eltham is there, and don't really know key elements of its history, which I'll just go into that. I think that's a really important thing. So there is this gap there between the sense of ownership with the local area and this really important site, which, you know, for many people, it doesn't really have a role in their understanding and in their sense of their local area. So why theatre?
Well, good question. Why theatre? Well, it gives you an opportunity to tell stories and explore stories and reinterpret stories for an audience and the young people telling it, or, you know, or whoever's telling it, to take risks. I mean, at the National Youth Theatre, we're all about taking creative risks with young people, ensuring that they feel recognised and seen within the heritage site. So theatre animates the space. It gives ownership to the young people telling the stories. They can place themselves within the stories, within the site, within the heritage. They can build on the true, real stories that we know from the written history and the oral history of that site, but they can build on it and use their imagination to develop those stories and place them then and now. So it felt like an absolutely brilliant marriage of heritage and theatre. It feels like a great connection, and not just the regular sort of reinterpretation, the historical characters, you know, taking the facts. It's really about expanding the facts and taking it much further and making it relevant.
So Eltham Palace is a very sort of interesting book. The first mention in the Domesday Book. Later it was granted to Prince Edward, who became King Edward II. It's got some really important sort of historical VIPs from Henry VIII, and then it was trashed and ransacked following the Civil War. It spent quite a while as a barn in the 18th century, and there's some beautiful paintings of kind of animals lingering around, you know, chewing hay, walking through the ruins of the Great Hall. And in the 20th century, it was purchased by the Courtaulds, Virginia and Stephen Courtauld, seen in the picture on the right with their pet lemur called Mahjong. And it was renovated into this really luxurious Art Deco mansion by the partners, who were a queer lovers, John Seeley and Paul Paget. And they were sort of top London architects at the time. And the house turned into this amazing, it had underfloor heating, it had the sound system in every room. I mean, it's a really, really, I guess these would be modern conveniences now, but to think of them in the 1930s is really, really exceptional. So this place has all of this rich history. It has this vibrancy to it, and everything. And walking around now, it can feel a little bit like a mausoleum. It doesn't really have that sense of life and that sense of excitement. One of the big events that happened in the Middle Ages was a giant feast on Christmas Day with 2,000 people, and that kind of sense of importance, that really important history related to, you know, key moments in the history of England. All is the queer elements of that really aren't particularly well covered by the on-site interpretation, or just by a sense of what people, a connection to this place and what it is. So our house came with some challenges, and there were some sort of curatorial challenges in terms of interior of the space. We have to ensure that we, conserve the historic fabric, that we don't break things, but also that we don't break the history. That's one of the really important elements for English heritage and for any heritage and museum organization, is this inherent sort of attraction to facts and what is factual. And of course, that's a real problem when it comes to queer history, because often we have to, almost forcibly extract these stories from the evidence that were written in a way, or these artifacts or this histories were written in a way to hang on to these things and not want to give up the stories of queer people and other kinds of individuals or communities that were marginalized or persecuted, and these stories end up being suppressed. So what that means in a heritage setting, I think, is particularly interesting and was a big challenge for us. Of course, everybody has different priorities. I think what Anna and the National Youth Theatre and the young people were interested in, you had all different priorities there. I don't know if you want to mention anything about that, Anna.
Yeah, I think for the young people, the challenge really was going into a space where they weren't sure they were welcome. They weren't sure they were seen or recognized. They couldn't see other people like them. And so for them, it was a real challenge to sort of build their confidence to be able to take the space and own the space. And their priority was really to sort of shout out that they exist, and that they're loud, some of them, and that they're young, and that this space belonged to them as well. So that was a challenge, going into a space that hasn't done a project like this before with young people, and young people do lean against walls and do sit down if there's a chair there, and do want to, make noise and sing songs. So yeah, that was a challenge.
I think for us, it was really great to see all of that and to have that, because we become, I think, a little bit obsessive about the pristine nature of everything that, everything that's there. But of course, this was a house that was used in festivities, that had parties, that was lavish, and was about, with the sound system in every room, it was intended to be filled with sound and voices, and it was really incredible to see that. I think some of the other challenges were about the different priorities, and about how do we mitigate those, how do we bring all of those priorities together and kind of build consensus around that. And what was really impressive, I thought, was the way all the young people sort of came together and did that, and really led that process for themselves, and led the way in which they would work together. The actors from the National Youth Theatre worked together with the young people from Metro Charity, who didn't come from an acting background, and for whom acting or theater wasn't necessarily a priority, even if it was the activity they were involved with.
Yeah, I mean, to jump in there, Dominique, it was for the young people from Metro and some of the young people from National Youth Theatre, this project was more about their identity and more about them sort of feeling that they were allowed to be the young people that they were in terms of their identity and gender. And so for some of them, it wasn't about putting on a play. It was much more about being part of a community and feeling welcome within that community. So it was a really extraordinary project in that sense, because it was life-changing. It truly was life-changing for some of those young people who couldn't be the person they wanted to be in any other environment than the place that, we made the rehearsals very safe, and when they're at Metro Charity, they could be who they wanted to be, but not at home potentially.
I think that was also really important. I think that's the most important element of all of this, is that in some ways the piece of theater, the historical interpretation, everything else that we were doing was very much secondary and a really long way down for these young people. But I think it's really interesting the way in which these this historical setting was able to be that safe space, and kind of went from it for them from being a place that they felt really alienated from and something that were very apprehensive and very cautious about, to a place that, you know, they felt a great deal of ownership about. I think this is probably a good time to play the little teaser video that will give everybody a little bit of a sense of what's happening, of what the play was about and what it was. And
we are making a new piece of theatre that celebrates and uncovers the hidden queer history that is located at Eltham Palace.
I want to create a piece of theatre which makes the people that feel like English heritage sites aren't for them. It's actually their right to be there, because these sites, they are designed for us and by us.
It's owning the queer stories that came with this site, the unspoken story. Queerness is a celebration.
We have to create those conversations. These real life people were never heard, and it feels like it's our responsibility to finally give them a voice and to empower ourselves to have our own voices.
thank you, Dan. And just moving on, I think, Anna, now we've got sort of the second part of our little talk is for us to have a chat, because we thought that would be nicer for people than listening and watching more panels, you know, slides, not panel like that. So I guess for me, the big question really is, you know, what theater in Eltham Palace, and you know, why do we use, you know, what was for you the value of Eltham Palace as the venue for staging a theatrical production?
I think what was brilliant about Eltham Palace is there is some queer history within Eltham Palace. So that was an absolutely brilliant starting point. So to be able to read about the architects, to be able to read about the Coulthards and their extravagant parties and the people that lived there and came and stayed there, it immediately felt there was a way in, and the stories were really rich and really gay, you know, in a fun way, you know, in a loud, and like you said, that the house had sort of underfloor heating, was you know, had sound systems in every room. It felt like it was calling out to be animated and to be filled with music again and filled with words again. And so to then add a group of young queer people to that story, and for them to wander around it and feel connected to it just by some of the stories that were there, you know, Edward and the king and all of those things, for them to have that starting point, to feel like there is some of their history there, it just exploded into being able to find other stories, to expand those stories, to tell those stories, to animate the characters theatrically, to be bold and theatrical. So it felt like a really good unison to use music, to use theatre, to use words, also to really physically connect to the space with their bodies. So really thinking this wasn't a regular sort of proscenium arch theatre piece. The whole point of this was to embrace the building, so to go on a promenade, so to walk through the building, to take the audience on a journey, to unravel the stories that might have happened, so to think about what the servants, you know, the lives of the servants there that aren't documented. Some of, you know, there's not documented stories of much of that. So to then for the young people to go, what would it be like to be a young gay servant in this world, compared to the sort of the upper classes that were living here, who were, you know, sort of allowed to be a bit more gay then. But so, yeah, theatre felt like the perfect fit, but I'm completely biased as a theatre person. So, but yeah, we exploded the space with sound and words and life.
It's probably the most, I think, alive I've felt you know, any of our sites really ever to have been, is to have that creativity just completely filling up all of the spaces. You know, we often talk at English Heritage, our tagline is "We bring history to life," and we've often used living interpretation, and we still do at many of our sites, and it's a really great way for people to get in touch with the past. But what I think this captured that I haven't really experienced at any other time, at least not in my career, is the way in which the house sort of, it just became, it sort of felt more itself. It felt more real and more authentic as a result of the layers of creativity, of imagination and thought and interpretation that these people brought to it. And for me, that has changed from my understanding and the way that I think about Eltham Palace. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say that the creative team that worked on the project, so the Kane Husbands and the Pappy Show and Ben Salmon, the writer, Tristan Parks, the composer, brought really great ideas to the project too, because they talked about Eltham now. So what is happening in Eltham now compared to the 30s and 20s? And why is it that people literally living opposite don't know Eltham Palace is there? And how can we bring those people into the site and make it relevant to them? So I think what was interesting was also some of the characters we developed were about the local people that live in Eltham. So as you know, Eltham is a wedding venue most weekends. Every Saturday it's given over to weddings, because obviously it's financially the way that organizations survive, is to make some money corporately. So we began the story with a gay wedding, and I don't know whether there's been gay weddings at Eltham Palace. I'm not sure. I hope there have been. But it felt like to have a queer wedding with two women getting married. We sort of recognise the fact that it's a wedding site as well now, and how can we have an audience arrive as though they're arriving at a wedding and not know that we're then going to take them. Brilliant. Someone said there's definitely been gay weddings. So pleased. How can we then take them on a journey that they're going to discover the history of this house through stories, but they won't know at the beginning. They think they're at a wedding. So we sort of played with what Eltham Palace is now, as well as what it was then, and what we went through is the sort of all the times in history where maybe it's been taken over by soldiers, became an army sort of headquarters for a while. And we sort of talked about a story within there about a young gay man, and then we went through to the time when it was Henry VIII and Edward and I always want to say Gaveston, but is that the goggling mixture? Yeah. Yeah, I think it. Yeah, I'm rambling, but I'm very excited to watch the film back, because it just fills me with joy and emotion, because it was such a special project.
I feel like what they've done, or what these young people have done, is really create, really demonstrate the connection that existed. They breathed life and color into something that can seem very staid, and they demonstrated the way in which the historical evidence that we use can form the basis in a really authentic way for creative exploration, and those explorations being at the heart of what allows people to connect to places and draw that personal connection to a site. Eltham Palace is important because of lots of things that happened there, or lots of people that went there, but as a building itself, its meaning is because of its connection to people. Mm-hmm. And its meaning today and its value today is absolutely connected to the way in which people today value it. And so if we can help people feel a sense of ownership, a sense of belonging, then that's a good thing. And I think especially when we're talking about young people, they're, what younger people today are interested in are different than what young people, 30 years ago or 200 years ago were interested in. And these places will only continue to have value if people value them. And I think that what we want to be doing is creating these platforms and empowering people to use their own voice and their own creativity to do that. And the Our House performance and all of the work that the creative team, as you say, Kane, Ben, Tristram, all of the actors, all of the young people from Metro did that. They created a narrative for this place that allowed them to imprint that both on themselves, but Eltham is forever changed for that work as well. Yeah,
it felt like it was a bit like landing on the moon for the first time and placing the flag. The end scene in Our House was literally full of flags and banners and posters saying, "We're here, we're proud." And it felt like they placed a flag in Eltham Palace and that won't ever leave, which is extraordinary.
I think that's right. And, to have the rainbow flag flying at Eltham during the performances as well was also really, really wonderful. I guess, these are some of the questions that sort of Anna and I were thinking about around what does it mean to co-curate with communities? I mean, one of the questions I have about this project, and we're going to wrap up in a minute so we can have questions from the audience, is really about, was this a co-curation project, or was it really us sort of, trying to give resource and support to the young people who really did take the lead on this? I mean, it's a devised play, and what that means, I've learned, is that all of the script, even though it was brought together by a writer, were things that the young people said, and pieces of dialogue and bits and pieces here and there from them. So there wasn't we didn't start with a script that then got modified. It all came from them.
Yeah, I think it's really an important point, that, because then they felt completely a part of what the words were, because they'd said them in rehearsal. The whole sort of lead up to before they went into rehearsal was working with some of the experts and the heritage experts. So really getting to understand Eltham Palace as a heritage site. So they'd been around the site as a group of young people and explored it and done the tour, and then had some meetings with some heritage experts on it. But then the important thing was, in the rehearsal, they sort of exploded those stories. There was no script. The writer sat in the room. And just to say, the writer and the director are also, young people. I say young, much younger than me. So that they listened, they navigated, they steered the rehearsals to. We knew the spaces that we were sort of allowed to be in as well, and that an audience could go through. So we used the architecture of the building as well. So we were our rehearsal site was, minutes away from Eltham Palace. It was an education centre next to the palace. So when the palace was closing around 4 o'clock, the young people would arrive into the palace, because it's really important with this kind of site-specific immersive work that you actually respond to the site and to the space. So they would then go on site and begin to find the stories that were within the walls, as it were, and within the spaces. And that was the devising process, really responding to the space, to the stories, to what the rooms felt like, and what might have happened in those rooms, particular spaces where they would take the audience. So yeah, it was a brilliant devising process.
Thank you, Anna. So I think we can sort of end it there.
Oh, hello.
Hi, Anna. There we go. Dominique can come and join us. There she is. Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful video presentation. We've got some opportunity for questions from our attendees. I thought I'd start with the first one, which is, how can we watch the film? Is it available for us to see the whole thing?
Yep, it's on YouTube. I can put the link in the chat, and I think everybody should be able to watch it. I think it's about 10 minutes long, so you don't have to make a lifetime commitment to it. Although I really challenge anyone to watch it and not feel moved. So I'll put that link in the you know, in the chat in a second.
Now, Sue Sanders has her hand raised. Sue, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
I think I have I?
Not yet. Can you speak it now?
Sorry, I've switched to my phone and maybe this isn't a good idea.
It's all right, we can hear you. If you've got a question, you can ask your question now.
Right, okay. I basically, what I wanted to say was I am so excited because when I talked about that in the past, I said how important theatre was. And then the next piece is this. And of course, what this is young people using theatre ineffectively. And in a place where Eltham, and you were talking about what has happened in Eltham, of course, Eltham was the place where Stephen Lawrence was killed. Yeah. So it's an incredibly important place when we think about diversity, when we think about tackling hate crime, when we think about racism and homophobia, and I'm sure you got that in there, and I'm dying to see the film. And I basically wanted to say a huge thanks, and that Paul and I, as ex-drama teachers, would have just loved to have been a part of that, and it's just so wonderful to see it. So a huge thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thanks for those comments. Any more questions or thoughts from our audience and participants, please? What surprised you most with the results of the project? Were any responses from the young people that you did not anticipate? Questions?
Yeah, I'll jump. Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry. No. Thanks, Dominique. I think what we weren't expecting was for it to be so emotional, such a massive emotional journey for the young people, and also how connected they felt as a company. So before they were part of the company, they didn't know each other, and there were 25, 26 young people from 2 different organizations. And so I think what was very unexpected was that we do this process at NYT where we always check in and we check out every day, and at the checkout at the end of the performance, the young people were saying that their lives were forever changed and that they had found this community where they felt safe. And for some of them, they were in really challenging times. Some of them were really going through, they were transitioning and they were being bullied, and they were, it was a really, really difficult time for some of them. So I think for it to be so important, I mean, like I said in the video, I am very biased about this kind of work because I really do think theatre changes lives, and I really do think we can tell stories that we can't really speak about in other forums sometimes. So it's not that unexpected for me, but it knocks me every time when I hear the feedback. It was, and the standard was amazing. The film is not the play. So the film is not the play that we put on. It's about the process of how we put it on.
The documentary.
Exactly. Dominique.
I was struck, your position at English Heritage, and whether what you've done at Eltham House can be, as it were, replicated across some of the other sites for English Heritage, and the opportunities. Yeah, well, I was struck especially when I saw history crossed out and changed to news story. The word HIS replaced with NEW. Is that a phrase that English Heritage will start using, do you think, much now?
It's probably one of the catchphrases of, can you hear me, of the National Youth Engagement Program. So Shout Out Loud is really about that, drawing a line under things and saying something new and fresh, and giving that opportunity to young people for them to share, their own thoughts and ideas. History, to be an expert in history is not to be able to rattle off a series of facts. It's about, thinking about the reasons why things might have happened, and analyzing situations. Young people have all kinds of tools. They're very sophisticated in their own, social environments, in their own communities, and with their own friends. And it's really, I think, about, for us, and what the Shout Out Loud program is encouraging young people to use the tools that they have already as a way, and think about history as a way of expressing themselves. And so for us, so Shout Out Loud is a National Youth Engagement Program. The National Youth Theatre is a partner, is a consortium partner on that, and we are working on more projects. We'd love to do more of these things all over the country. They're very time intensive and they're expensive. They're worth every penny, but I think we would love to be able to broaden the program out. We have a really exciting project that's been in the works, that's in a research and development phase now, and we're really, fingers crossed, hoping to stage this summer at Portchester Castle, which is which is originally a Roman castle on the south coast, but in the 18th century was a prisoner of war depot for Britain during the Napoleonic Wars, and held over 2,000 African Caribbean prisoners of war who had been, I guess, pressed into the French army to fight on behalf of the French, and in exchange for their freedom. Most of them had been enslaved people working on French plantations in the Caribbean. And we've been working, English Heritage has been working with academics and artists on this story for some time. And we had an opportunity through this. We saw Shout Out Loud, we saw the Our House program, and just, had this bonkers idea of doing something that would be even more ambitious at Portchester. And so we're doing a kind of a decolonized version of a play that was written about the Haitian Revolution at Portchester this summer. So the project is called Freedom and Revolution. There's a little bit of it on the Shout Out Loud website, which you can visit. But at some point we're going to start, I think, selling tickets. But I think, just going back to the earlier point about that, as a sort of a queer person, as a lesbian of a certain age, I have a personal memory of going to gay bars and being in spaces with loads of other gay people. And part of that is because the places that I lived, I spent a long time working in Northern Ireland, and in Ireland, gay people didn't have all the rights, and there was lots of protests, and, lots of homophobia, and being in those all queer spaces is something that's really kind of incredible. And I'm not sort of bemoaning the fact that young people don't go to bars the way that we used to, because that makes me sound really old and kind of bitter. But I think that to be in that kind of environment with your queer ancestors and your kind of queer elders, who are all kind of willing you to be yourself, is something that's, I think, is a really, really incredible thing. And I don't know if we're ever going to be able to replicate that particular element, because it all comes at a moment in time. But that was really special too.
I think what I'm really hearing is it's the empowering and the sharing of that empowerment, which is the wonderful legacy and achievement of what you did at Eltham House. And it won't be replicated in quite the same way, but empowerment will, and going to history for empowerment will be replicated again and again. And that's what this festival is about, to refuel us and to show us how to do that, and to take that into our own perspectives as enjoyers of history and culture, and people who engage with it. So I'm going to say a huge thank you, please, to Anna and to Dominique for telling us about your extraordinary work. Really, hats off to you. We applaud you, and we say please continue to collaborate and do other similar projects across English heritage sites. And lots of thank yous going on in chat now. So Anna and Dominique, thank you very much indeed. So I'm going